Hello, welcome to Hattie Talks and this week's episode of Turn Back Time Tuesdays. This is where every Tuesday we sit down and we talk about a historical figure or a historical event that particularly interests me. So if you've subscribed, thank you very much. And if you haven't, go do that now. I've also just started a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and they're both called Hattie Talks History. So if you look them up on Facebook and Instagram and also Twitter, you will see my pages, and I will be uploading regular history facts, some of which I won't be talking about on this channel, so it's important that you go like and follow them. This past week I rewatched a certain musical film starring Hugh Jackman and Zac Efron that came out in 2017. It is, of course, Tbe Greatesr Showman. I love this film, so I thought it would be fun to find out a bit more about Phileas Taylor Barnum. Also, there are quite a lot of inaccuracies or fictional things that happen in the film, so whenever we see one of them, I will point it out to you. Phineas Taylor Barnum, also known as P.T Barnum, was born in Connecticut on the 5th of July, 1810. He was the son of Phileas Barnum, who was an innkeeper and a tailor, and his second wife, Irene. When his father died in 1825, Barnum and his mother and many siblings were left penniless. His mother carried on running the family tavern, and for his own father's funeral, he had to borrow some money just to buy some shoes. At age 15, he was already struggling. However, he didn't let it get to him. Young Barnum was a fan of practical jokes. Once on a 7-day voyage, a group of men didn't have a razor to shave their face, but Barnum did. He said he would lend them the razor, but that they were running out of time and they had to do it quick. Therefore, he came up with a plan. Everyone would line up, the men would shave half of their faces before passing the razor on to the person next to them. That person would then shave half of their face and continue until it reached the end of the line. The person on the end of the line would finish off shaving and pass it back down, and everyone would sort out their other side of the face. It got to the end of the line, and of course Phineas was the end of the line. He shaved his whole face, and when he went to pass the razor to the next person, he accidentally dropped the razor overboard. Safe to say, all of the residents of New York City were in hysterics when the passengers landed in New York Harbour with half-shaven faces. This was the type of humour that Barnum had, and he never outgrew. Looks-wise, he was 6'2", with a receding hairline and apparently a big bulbous nose. He was described as friendly, kind, thoughtful, as well as egotistical, which I do think comes across in the film. Over the years, he had many businesses, including a general store, and he even started a local newspaper called the Herald of Freedom. He was imprisoned for 2 months after talking against the elders of the local church. In 1829, he met Charity Hallett, who we do meet in the film, and they had 4 children together, not just the 2 girls we meet in the film. He sold the store in 1834, and a year later began his career as a showman. Barnum was 25 years old when he purchased and held an exhibition of a partially blind, completely paralysed slave named Joyce Heath. He claimed that this slave was the former nurse to George Washington and that she was 161 years old. Lots of people, of course, doubted this, but they were inclined to believe it when they saw her, as she was of very small frame, she had very deep-set wrinkles, and she had no teeth. This was allegedly because P.T Barnum had pulled out her teeth to make her appear more old. He said that if anyone didn't believe him, when she died, he would have an autopsy done on her to prove that she was 161 years old. When she did then die and the autopsy was done, she was found to be no more than 80 years old. Barnum's first year as a showman was reasonably successful until the Panic of 1837, a financial crisis in the United States that led to 3 years of struggle for Barnum. In 1841, he purchased Scudder's American Museum and renamed it Barnum's American Museum, which is very unique, Barnum. Well done for that name. He upgraded the building and he upgraded the exhibits, and it became quite popular. He added flags to the outside of the building to attract attention and large pictures of giant animals in all of the windows for the passers-by to look at and think, oh yeah, I want to go in there. He also turned the roof into a stroller's garden, and he had daily hot air balloon rides. It was then that he added live acts into the mix, including jugglers, acrobats, giants, and also a range of animals. It wasn't until 1842 that Barnum had his first big hoax: the Fiji Mermaid. The Fiji Mermaid was the body of a monkey which had been attached to the tail of a fish, mostly using paper mache. He had leased this from another museum owner and claimed to use it to draw in a crowd. Next came Charles Stratton, also known as General Tom Thumb. He was only 4 years old when they met and a distant relative, but Phineas claimed that he was 11. He would go on tour with Barnum and imitate people such as Cupid and Napoleon, and at age just 5 he was smoking and drinking just to go along with this imitation. Charles met Queen Victoria twice and also met infant Edward VII. He was naturally talented at both singing and acting and dancing, and critics would often critique him as a professional entertainer rather than just a part of a freak show. So that is one of the lies that The Greatest Showman tell. Tom Thumb, Charles Stratton, wasn't an adult when he met Barnum. He was a child, and Barnum paid Charles's family to let him take Charles on tour. Charles did then go on to have a very successful career of his own. During this time, Barnum brought other museums, and it is thought that the Barnum Museum was drawing in visitors in large numbers, possibly 400,000 visitors a year. So during a tour of Europe with Tom Thumb, Barnum became aware of an opera singer called Jenny Lind, who was also known as the Swedish Nightingale. Just like in the film, he had never actually heard her sing, but he asked her to sing 150 nights for $1,000 a night in America, all expenses paid. Lind agreed, but demanded to be paid in advance so that she could raise money for charities, mainly to get education for poor children in Sweden. The contract also allowed Lind to end the tour early after 60 or 100 shows, and if she did, she would have to pay Barnum $25,000 back of what she's already been given. So in 1850, she sailed to America, and at the port she was met by 40,000 people, and at her hotel there were 20,000 people. Bear in mind, Jenny Lind wasn't very well known in America at this point. It was Barnum that had been building up her reputation so that she was such a big sensation when she came. Again, he's never actually heard her sing. When she realised her fame in America, she demanded that the contract be changed, and that in addition to the $1,000 a night, she would also take home any additional money that each concert made after Barnum took $5,500 first. So any profit that each concert made, Barnum would take $5,500, she would take the rest, basically. She was determined to raise as much money for her charities as possible. The concerts began on the 11th of September 1850, and they were a huge success. Some tickets were even auctioned off at a high price because they were just in such high demand. When Jenny Lind found out about this, though, she was shocked. She was not happy at all, and she demanded that Barnum sell a substantial amount of the tickets at a reduced price to make up for it. But it didn't take long after that for Lynn to become uncomfortable again by Barnum's marketing styles. He was so persistent and so eager for money that it made her feel a bit uncomfortable, and she did end up using that clause in her contract to break it. She left the tour early and both left each other's company amicably. For the 93 concerts held, Jenny made $350,000 and Barnum took home $500,000, which is the equivalent to over 15 million today. Lies that the film tells you, number 2. There was no romance going on between the two, and there was absolutely no rumour of a romance at all. That whole part is completely fictional. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to add that part, because they have creative license and I love the film. But just so that you know, in real life, there is absolutely not even no proof, there is no talk or even wonder that that ever happened. It just didn't happen. So next on Barnum's list, he wanted to make the theatre more accessible and more of a middle-class respectable entertainment rather than as it was known, which was a den of evil. So he opened a theatre in New York City called the Moral Lecture Room. He wanted to reach families, so he often watered down Shakespeare plays to make them more family-friendly. He organised beauty pageants, dog shows, baby contests, where in the baby contests you'd be competing for things like the fattest baby or the most handsomest twins, just little things like that, which were a huge success. He completed his autobiography in 1854, which sold over 1 million copies, although the British Examiner claimed that it was trashy, offensive, and that they felt sincere pity for the wretched man who compiled it. So, not very positive. After all that, Barnum invests in a company which unfortunately goes bankrupt, and this begins 4 years of public humiliation and a personal crisis. It was actually Tom Thumb that comes to his rescue and offers to do a tour with him. Charles Stratton, Tom Thumb, had already been doing tours and shows on his own, but he asked Barnum to join in with him and they can do it together. So they go on tour, and Barnum manages to build his way out of debt and build a mansion, which is pretty cool. And then he creates America's first aquarium, which I did not know. So, in the film, you might remember 2 Siamese twins. They don't really get a lot of attention, they're just kind of in the background. But these are real life people, and they are called Chang and Eng, and they are Siamese twins. And they had previously gone on tours and everything, not with Barnum, separately. And then they had settled down, they had a family. They had, between them, 21 children. One man had 10 and one had 11, so they were pretty even. So they then wanted to send some of them off to college, so they wanted to make some more money again. So they ended up working with Barnum, which I just thought was really interesting because they are actually in the film and they are actually real life people, which, spoiler alert, cannot be said for some other characters. Keep watching to find out who. So then the Civil War happens, and during this time, Barnum's museum is very, very popular. People are using it as a distraction to let them forget about the unrest and the conflict that's happening around them. But another unfortunate moment in Barnum's life, Barnum's American Museum burns down in 1865 from unknown causes. So he reestablishes it in another building in another part of New York City, but in 1868, that one burns down. These 2 fires end Barnum's career as a museum owner. Another lie that the film likes to tell you. Yes, he had fires in his museum, but these fires were not started by a brawl or a fight. Well, they don't know what they're started by, but we're pretty sure that if it had been started by a fight, there would have been record of it, either in the police files or in the press, but there is absolutely no mention of a fight or a brawl in real life. So it's more likely that maybe it was an accident or a competitor of Barnum's did it, but it wouldn't have been a public fight. After these two fires that he entered the circus business aged 60. He established P.T Barnum's Grand Travelling Museum, Menagerie, Caravan and Hippodrome in 1870 with William Cameron Cooke. The name is quite a mouthful and it changed many times, one of which being P.T Barnum's Travelling World's Fair, Great Roman Hippodrome and Greatest Show on Earth. Get it? Like The Greatest Showman? The Greatest Show. I thought that was funny. But after all these very, very long names that I'm sure no one could remember, like no kid is going to be like, Mummy, can we go to P.T Barnum's Travelling Grand Great Show and it's got Hippodrome and like no one, it's too long. So they eventually changed it to Barnum's and Bailey's. And in 1882, Barnum bought Jumbo, which was an African elephant from London Zoo. The circus also included acts like acrobats, freak shows, and of course, General Tom Thumb. In 1873, Charity, Barnum's wife, died of heart failure. And Barnum was actually on tour in Europe at the time and was devastated, and he decided to stay in Europe a bit longer. So he travelled to England and he met up with an old friend, and it took Barnum, after 44 years of marriage, less than a year to remarry his friend's daughter, who was 40 years younger than him. And her name was Nancy Fish. Despite more fires continuing throughout his circus career, Barnum was relentless and he just kept going until 1891 when he died of a stroke. He was buried in Mountain Grove Cemetery, Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is the cemetery that he designed. Nancy Fish was left a large fortune and became his very rich widow. And that's it. That's the life of Phileas Barnum. I know what you're thinking. Where are all those lovable characters we see in Greatest Showman? Well, Zac Efron and Zendaya's characters, they never actually fell in love. One of the main reasons being because they didn't actually exist. They are fictional. The bearded lady, Letty Lutz, who is played by Keala Settle, was a real person. She was actually called Annie Jones, and she didn't meet Barnum as an adult, as in the film. She actually met Barnum aged just 1, and she joined the museum / circus world then. She had a long, successful career and was known for her musical talents. Phileas wasn't some man trying to stand up for the underdogs, like it can easily come across in the film. He was much more money-driven and he didn't really take good care of any of his acts anyway. As I said, that first slave, all her teeth were pulled out and quite a lot of the animals were abused. I don't think that we should really be idolising Phileas Taylor Barnum in the way that the film quite does. That's not a criticism on the film, that is just simply... That's why I made this video, just to educate a bit more about what the real character was actually like. But it is interesting that he didn't actually cheat on his wife, that we know of. So that's one good thing, I guess. But he was also mean to animals and people, so that's a thing against him. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you have any suggestions, please comment below. I do now have a Facebook page which is called Hattie Talks History, and I also have an Instagram called Hattie Talks History, so please check both of them out. They include daily history facts, some of which I won't be talking about on this channel, so it's important that you check them out. Thank you so much for those who've subscribed, and if you haven't, don't forget to do that before you leave. Have a safe week and life, wear your mask, social distance, blah blah blah, and I'll see you next week.